time, all of England will know of Raven Clan and the glory we brought to that fractured land. So to England, glory and destiny!
To England!
To England! For Valhalla!
I don't know where to start.
Literally, I started writing this, changed my opinion and completely had to start all over again.
I've said in a previous video that I thought there were 4 points to take into consideration when looking at an Assassin's Creed game. The location and historical setting, decent gameplay mechanics, an interesting main plot, and an engaging assassin. For the most part, I can still take these into consideration, except there's one small problem with that. Are Assassin's Creed games really still Assassin's Creed games at their core? Let's go back to those points I just mentioned, then we'll get to the core of the whole franchise. And for the sake of this initial review, I'll say it's mostly spoiler free. I'm probably only about 30 hours in and by no means am I nearly finished, but I'll try and stay as clear as possible from significant plot points. Assassin's Creed Valhalla takes place in the 9th century and you're a Viking. That's it. Alright, I'm oversimplifying it here, I really am. There's more to it than that. But the main selling point of this game is that you're a Viking. You rage, you pillage, you spend a lot of time getting drunk. Occasionally you're high on mushrooms too. I'm going to be honest, when the game was announced I didn't get any excitement at the prospect of being a Viking. But that's me. If you're into Viking culture and Norse mythology, then this is the game for you. Not just as an Assassin's Creed game, but as an RPG type thing. However, as for everything historic going on, it's not really much interest to me.
This hasn't got off to a good start, has it?
Gameplay mechanics. Surely that's all fine. Yeah, I guess. I'm finding the combat clunky. That's the best way I can describe it. For the first time you can dual wield weapons and I think that's where I'm having the most issue. It takes some practice to correctly parry with your second weapon, which is normally a shield for me. I feel like when I'm playing I can see the moment in combat where I should use my shield. I press the corresponding button and I just don't feel it always does the job it should. When I first started playing I hated the combat because of this, and it does take some practice, but I'm like 30 hours in now, it can't all be me. The thing is, having to time your attacks correctly and block is what stops the combat from being a button bashing, slashing mess. There is a skill to it, I will admit, I just don't think it's as responsive as it could be, and I'm finding that with other aspects of attack too. Once upon a time I'd move on to free running and how you navigate the environment, but I feel like we're moving more and more away from that in Assassin's Creed. Obviously you can climb around the environments, but like Odyssey the map is absolutely massive and widespread, and you're no longer contained to cities that were perfect for free running and parkour. It doesn't help that when you are climbing about, that it doesn't always feel totally smooth and fluid. You can't doubt that the environments are beautiful, when the textures load correctly, but I'll get back to that. However, there are times when I'm moving between objectives that I view the map and have to weigh up which method of getting there is quicker. Do I jump on a horse, take command of my longship, or do I just sit through the loading screen and fast travel?
If you have to calculate the quickest route between point A and point B, perhaps your map's a little bit too big. That's all I'm saying.
I loved Odyssey. Odyssey reignited my passion for this franchise. But one of my biggest issues was the size of the map. When trying to tie up all the loose ends with side quests, I never appreciated being sent from one end of the map to the other just to take 5 minutes to do something, then for it to take twice as long to get back to the start point. However, Valhalla does have something going for it. You don't have tons and tons of side quests now, you get world events, and they're all pretty self-contained in the area they're in and don't take forever to do. That I like. Next, with an Assassin's Creed game, I'd probably discuss the stealth, as once upon a time it was a staple of the series. But quite frankly, the stealth is terrible. To me anyway. You have enemies with the dumbest AI I think I have ever seen in combat, but they have eyes in the back of their head, and I feel like they manage to see you without even looking at you. It really doesn't help that the controls for an assassination are very precise. The amount of times I've slowly gone up behind an enemy, got in close, kept myself undetected, then clubbed somebody over the head with an axe rather than assassinate them because I wasn't just quite in the right spot. Look, part of me thinks that when you're a Viking, stealth doesn't feel the most natural course of action. I get that, it makes sense, but I miss missions that would be dependent on remaining completely undetected. Irony of that is, in older games I was terrible at stealth. I tried hard, but it always ended in an all-out fight, and I miss the challenge of it. You can of course choose to go for a stealthy approach, but I'm finding it impossible. I include social stealth in that too. I keep being detected, so I'm just finding it easier to get into an all-out fight rather than sneak about. I should probably put a massive disclaimer on this. The impossibility of stealth may be down to my skills. I could just be that bad at it. Or my skill tree isn't configured very well. But quite frankly, look at the size of it! Is it any wonder I possibly don't have my skills set up very well? So what about the main plot? Well, after a bit of a slow start, and boy do I mean a slow start, because we'd hit the shores of England before I started taking any interest in the plot. After a very long and boring prologue in Norway, I will say yes, there is an interesting plot. Like I said earlier, I'm not finished. Not by a long shot, I don't think. But there's enough happening that I want to go back for more and find out what's going to happen next. The plot develops in an interesting way. You go out and build alliances with other areas, and these are told over their own story arcs. It's a bit like the memory sequences of old, but longer, and it tells a self-contained story within that area. Some contribute towards the main story, and then some don't seem to at all, but they're interesting enough to make it engaging. And on to my final point. An engaging assassin. This is a difficult one. I started playing as female Eivor and thought she was dull. I switched to male Eivor and thought his voice acting was much better, but for some reason then missed female Eivor and switched back.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened either.
Anyway, I think I switched back at just the right time because I started a new story arc and it must have just been the right story with the right lines, because I had moments of, oh, okay, you're kind of a badass and kind of amusing in your own way. I don't know if it was by this point the voice actress just got into her role a bit more or what, but as the story progressed, I'm finding her more engaging. The short of all of it is, female Eivor has this amazing little smirk and I play as her now. The end. That trivial reason aside, I'm judging Eivor against the point of an engaging assassin. But Eivor isn't an assassin. Or they aren't for how far through I am. That might change, but I don't know. So does that mean Valhalla falls down straight away as an Assassin's Creed game? Because I can't even judge it against one of my own points for what makes a successful Assassin's Creed game. The Brotherhood are there and are part of the story, but it still doesn't feel right to call it an Assassin's Creed game when the lead character isn't an assassin. This is making it all seem like I don't like this game. I do. It took time for me to get there, but I do like it. I just don't care for it as an Assassin's Creed game. As a Viking RPG type thing, I think it's rather spot on for the experience. To me, Odyssey was a brilliant game. I loved it. But it wasn't an Assassin's Creed game. There was so little that tied it to Assassin's Creed other than perhaps the modern day aspects that I could forget it was altogether and just enjoy it as a standalone game. Valhalla is different. Valhalla is trying to toe the line between the two, and at the minute it feels like everything is kind of shoehorned in. And they could have told a much better story if they hadn't had to worry about making it an Assassin's Creed story. As much as I like the RPG style they're going for, it just isn't the same Assassin's Creed experience anymore. It can't be denied that the format of the older games was getting tired and boring, and I don't hate the new RPG style. I think it was what was needed as far as the games went, but I'm bothered about how removed from the original story idea they've become. At times it feels like the conflict between the Assassins and the Templars hinges entirely on the modern day elements, and let's be honest, They are not the strongest part of these games. They've barely even been interesting since Desmond Miles was around. I think part of that is for 5 games, one character linked everything together. The time periods came and went, so did some of the assassins, but Desmond remained a constant in the present. I know Layla Hassan is doing that to a certain extent now, but with less of the historical elements being linked to the Assassin Brotherhood in the past, it feels like there's less of a tangible link. Ubisoft just need to be brave and take the risk of having the same assassin through a run of games just like they did with Ezio. There's a reason he's a fan favourite, and it quite likely has something to do with the fact that players got a good run with him and saw his story develop over the years. I'm getting tired of a new assassin each and every game, because there are some I love and I feel cheated that I never got a longer run with them.
I promised myself I wasn't going to go on about Evie Fry and Syndicate again in another video, but I'm so very tempted. So I'm going about Cassandra instead.
And despite the fact this is a video about Valhalla, I'm going to warn about spoilers for the story in Odyssey. If you're going to make one of your characters immortal, pop up in the modern day part of the story, declare her the canon protagonist, then at least have the courage to give her another game. Cassandra could have quite literally been placed in any time period because of the staff. There could have been a reoccurring protagonist for a couple of games, and also a continuation of that part of the story, I'm quite sure.
Look, at the very least, as a small amusing Easter egg, they should be putting an NPC in the background of every game in future that looks like Cassandra.
This review feels like it's at a crossroads, a bit like the Assassin's Creed series as a whole. Overall, it's a good game, but that's all I can say. It's good. I'm not enjoying it enough to say it's great. I'm finding the gameplay average. As I've touched on with my earlier jab about textures not loading, it's a bit buggy, but it's a Ubisoft game, so of course it is. At the time of writing this, a game patch has just gone on, so hopefully some stuff will be fixed. But it's not going to make me unsee the things I've already seen. The music is nice, there are moments where there are interesting characters and the main plot is keeping me engaged. Overall, this one isn't for me, and I think that's a lot of what it comes down to. Vikings aren't for me. As for the Assassin's Creed franchise as a whole, time will only tell on that. I do like their more RPG style of gameplay, but I do miss aspects of the older games. I guess after this one we can only just wait and see what happens next. Thanks for watching. Drop me a comment to let me know what you thought of the game, or of the video. If you've enjoyed what you've watched, give it a thumbs up, or subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll be back soon with another video.